Is Bitcoin in danger or on discount? It's been a very volatile month for Bitcoin. We saw Bitcoin ticking up to start the month. Bitcoin hit a new all-time high above $126,000. And then a couple of weeks ago, we saw the largest flash crash in Bitcoin history in dollar terms. And we crashed down to around $100,000. So right now, I think a lot of people don't know whether to be scared or look at this as a good buying opportunity. So in this video, we're going to talk about where Bitcoin's at and if right now is a good time to buy. Before we get into it, please make sure to like the video and subscribe to the YouTube. Really appreciate your support. I'm also going to put a QR code down below for a Bitcoin tip. So if you want to support the channel, feel free to leave me a little tip. Now let's get into it. So Bitcoin hit a new all-time high earlier this month above $126,000, which I think is a great sign. We have continued to move incrementally higher and hit new all-time highs. I believe before this last one, the previous all-time high was around $124,500. So we didn't break it by that much, but it's still reassuring to see that Bitcoin continues to inch up higher. I think at some point we will get a bigger move, a bigger all-time high that takes us to that next level. However, after we hit this $126,000 all-time high, we quickly started moving down a couple of days later. I think Friday of that week, we crashed down to around $103,000. This was the largest flash crash that we've ever seen in Bitcoin's history when we think about it in dollar terms. We saw a lot of these other cryptocurrencies get wrecked even more, and we saw $19 billion worth of crypto liquidations in one day. So this was not a good day for Bitcoin. It was not a good day for the crypto market. A lot of people got wiped out, and it left a lot of people scared, thinking that we may be heading lower. Now, since then, Bitcoin has kind of gone up and down. Even on that Friday where we had that large flash crash, we did rebound and head up above $110,000. A couple of days ago, we headed down. We headed back towards that $103,000 level, and now we've bounced back up. We're currently trading around $113,000. So it seems like Bitcoin has kind of found a local bottom around $103,000. And a reason why that may be a local bottom is because that's right around where the 200-day moving average is for Bitcoin. The 200-day moving average is currently $103,643. So I do think that it's reassuring to see that we haven't broken below 100K and that we keep bouncing off this level right around the 200-day moving average. That's telling me that we have some support here and people are willing to buy Bitcoin in that lower 100K range. Now, understandably, when you have a big liquidation event like this and you see an asset drop like Bitcoin did, Bitcoin dropped $20,000 in one day, it's going to spark some fear into the markets, right? Some people are going to fear that the asset is going to drop more, and I think that is a reasonable fear to have. I checked the fear and greed index a couple of days ago, and it was sitting at 22, which is extreme fear, and I think that makes sense. Circling back to today, the fear and greed index for Bitcoin is at 34, so things are looking a little bit better. Bitcoin is actually having a great day. It's up over 5%. It's October 21st, and I'm going to talk about why Bitcoin is moving higher in a couple of minutes here. So it seems like the positive sentiment is coming back a little bit, but obviously when you have something like this happen, it's going to take some of that positive sentiment out of the market, that bullish sentiment. Now, the main reason that I think Bitcoin is still in a good place right now and more on discount than in danger is because of this changing macro environment. We've seen the Federal Reserve do quantitative tightening for quite a while now, right? They've been reducing their balance sheet and they've been taking liquidity out of the market for years. And we actually just got news that the Fed is going to be probably switching to QE pretty soon, where they're adding to their balance sheet and they're pushing liquidity back into the market, right? This is what we call money printing, right? When the Fed comes in and they buy up these US Treasury securities out of the market, they create new monetary units to do that. They push those out into the economy, and that's why we get inflation. That's why we get asset inflation, and it's really a main contributor to pushing asset prices like Bitcoin higher. So let's go ahead and take a look at a chart of the Fed balance sheet. And as you can see, since 2020, we saw the Fed balance sheet rising when we got hit with COVID. But since 2022, 2023, we've seen the balance sheet coming down. Recently, at this meeting for the National Association for Business Economics in Philadelphia, I believe it was last week, Jerome Powell basically signaled that they're going to be ending this QT and moving to QE, which is awesome. It's also looking like we're going to get some cuts to the federal funds rate, which is great for liquidity. I checked on Polymarket, and it looks like at the end of this month, we are going to get a 25 basis point cut. There's a 95% probability. And then in December, it looks like we're probably going to get another 25 basis point cut. On Polymarket, there is an 84% probability. So we are seeing things shift. We didn't see any rate cuts all year, and we just got one in September. We're getting one this month, and we're getting one to end the year. So I think that this macro environment, this looser monetary policy is going to be very good for Bitcoin. If you've been following Bitcoin, you know that Bitcoin trades with liquidity, and if liquidity is rising, that's going to be good for this asset. Now, although we're going to be shifting towards this bullish macro environment for Bitcoin, we have been seeing some signs that liquidity is drying up in the economy, and this makes you think if the Fed and the government don't act fast enough and switch to QE fast enough, could we see a crisis before we see a rally for Bitcoin and most other assets, right? Could we see asset prices drop before they go up? I was reading this really good article written by James Lavish. He's one of my favorite people in the Bitcoin space, and he has a great Substack called The Informationist. And in this article, he was talking about some of the things that we're seeing out there suggesting that liquidity is getting low for these financial institutions. In this article that he wrote, which I'm going to put a link for down below, he talked about how the reverse repo facility has been drained. Now, if you're not familiar with the reverse repo facility, it is this place where financial institutions can basically park their excess money, their excess liquidity, and you earn a yield around 4%. So let's go ahead and take a look at a chart which shows the balance for the reverse repo facility over the past 5 years or so. As you can see in this chart, around 2022, early 2023, financial institutions were keeping over $2 trillion in the reverse repo facility. But since then, we've seen this balance fall down to basically a couple $billion, which means that these financial institutions are running lower on liquidity. Now, one thing that James Lavish talked about in this article is how these financial institutions have been taking their money out of the reverse repo facility and moving it into short-term T-bills. And this has been creating a lot of treasury demand. The US Treasury has kind of found this loophole to create excess demand, which has been hard to find, right? People don't really want to buy US Treasuries because they've just been underperforming other assets, right? And really one thing that's signaling to us that people are interested in US Treasuries is how much the gold price has gone up. With the reverse repo facility running out, it's telling us that these financial institutions are running low on excess liquidity, and it's also telling us that the US Treasury is going to have to find another source of demand for these treasury bills, for treasury bonds, for treasury notes. And I think that source of demand is going to be from the Fed. I think that the Fed is going to switch to QE. They're going to start buying up US Treasuries, and they're going to start printing money, which is going to be great for Bitcoin. The question is, when are they going to do this? Another thing we've seen is that US bank reserves have dropped to a critical level. If we look at this chart, we could see that US bank reserves have fallen to $2.96 trillion. If you look at the beginning of this chart, you could see that around 2021, 2022, bank reserves were a lot higher. They were around $4 trillion. And As bank reserves head lower, it's signaling to us that these banks are running into liquidity issues, right? They need to free up liquidity. And if these banks and financial institutions need to free up liquidity, one thing that they might do is they might start selling off assets, right? Which is not going to be great for the markets. If assets start to sell off, Bitcoin could sell off with stocks or other securities, and we could see a crash in the short term. Now, one thing to think about is what happened a couple of years ago when we had a banking crisis, right? When we saw Silicon Valley Bank and First Republic Bank go down, we saw Bitcoin go up. Now, why did Bitcoin go up? Because Bitcoin is an alternative to the banking system, right? Bitcoin allows you to hold your money outside of this traditional system. So we could see, if we were to see liquidity dry up more and we were to see some bank failures or financial institutions get into trouble, this could be a great advertisement for Bitcoin. And in this type of crisis, we could actually see Bitcoin go higher. So it'll be interesting to see what happens here over the next 6 months. I don't think that the Fed and the US government are going to let bank failures happen, right? They don't want to deal with that. So I do think that we are going to see the Fed switch over to QE pretty soon here. And what I showed you with the reverse repo facility is a great indicator of that. So I think that the macro environment is going to look pretty great for Bitcoin in the coming months here. And I can't wait for us to see QE. When we really start seeing the Fed come in and printing money, buying up these US Treasury securities, that could send Bitcoin flying. Another reason why I think the future looks bright for Bitcoin is because of what we've been seeing with gold and silver recently. These hard money assets have been taking off. We just saw gold break above a $30 trillion market cap, and it also broke above $4,000 per ounce. And although these hard money assets have been going up, and Bitcoin has been going down, I really think that Bitcoin should be moving with these assets, right? Bitcoin is in this same category, and we're actually seeing something interesting today. Gold just pulled back today to $4,122 per ounce. It's down around 5%, and Bitcoin is up around 5%. So what we're seeing today is very interesting. We're seeing people rotating out of gold and into Bitcoin, and I think this makes sense. I think that Bitcoin is a better monetary asset, and really, a lot of people just don't quite understand Bitcoin yet, right? They treat Bitcoin like a security, like a stock, but if we're seeing these hard money assets going up and it's signaling distrust in the existing financial system, to me, that's a great advertisement for Bitcoin. As more people learn about it, I think that people are going to run to Bitcoin as a safe haven asset over gold and silver. To wrap it up here, I think that we're going to see a great macro environment for Bitcoin soon. I think that we're going to continue to see Bitcoin demand. Some things I've seen recently is that Charles Schwab, an $11 trillion financial giant, is going to be offering Bitcoin and crypto trading in 2026. I also saw that California passed a bill, Senate Bill 822, to allow the government to hold Bitcoin. California is the fourth largest economy in the world, so that's great news. And these are just a couple of things. Every day we get more bullish news. Every week we see big players like Strategy come in and buy up more Bitcoin. So I think that the near term is looking good. Will we hold above that 100K level? I think so. I think that there is a good amount of support there. A couple of weeks ago, when we saw this flash crash, we saw BlackRock buy up $5 billion worth of Bitcoin when we hit $105,000. So I do think that we have some big buyers the lower we go. If we break below 100K, it's just another great buying opportunity. If you're thinking long term, I don't think there's a bad price, and really the price doesn't matter. You just want to get as much Bitcoin as you can. So I would say Bitcoin is definitely on discount and not in danger. That's going to be it for this one. If you didn't like and subscribe, please make sure to do that now. Thanks for watching. I'll be back soon.